Fill us in on exactly what's happened here.
Chris Kaba was a 24-year-old black man who was shot by police in South London in September 2022. So essentially, he was driving a car that had been linked to a firearms incident the night before, and unmarked police cars followed him and radioed it in, and they set up a roadblock. Now, the police surrounded the vehicle, told him to get out, aiming guns at him, and he drove, sort of rammed into a police car in front, reversed, and trying to get through this roadblock. And a police officer, Martin Blake, shot him, one shot, and killed him. Now, this was investigated and recommended that it would go to trial. So he was charged with murder for killing Chris Kaba. And on Monday this week, he was found not guilty at the Old Bailey. And it's a very interesting case because, to me, I would have thought that was it, right? And I read the news on it and I thought, okay, so he's been found not guilty. It's clear if you watch there's video of it. To me, it seems pretty clear that this is it's clear cut, right? The police officer has acted in self-defense because Chris Kaba was driving, a huge vehicle trying to go through this roadblock. The police officer in question was concerned, and he said this in court, that he was concerned that one of his fellow officers was going to be killed. And the other officers actually gave testimony in court to say that if he hadn't have shot him, they would have pulled the trigger. So that to me seems almost the end of the story. And then I saw various politicians and organisations and groups talking about the injustice of this. And I thought that's very odd, because surely this is justice if he's found not guilty in a court of law. But why I'm concerned about it is because I think there are a group of people that are trying to stoke up racial divisions, because when he was killed in 2022, there was outrage from a lot of groups, including Black Lives Matter, and there were protests saying this is another police killing of a black man. And I would have thought that would end at the point where you realise that he's clearly not guilty. He's been found so in the court of law. But instead it kind of takes another direction. And this concerns me because if you think about who these police officers are, they're people that are protecting us and putting themselves in harm's way. Do you know how many police officers we have in the country, by the way?
I don't.
So we have 147,000. What percentage of those do you think are armed police officers?
Very small. It's 3%.
Wow, yeah, it's just less than 4%. We have 5,861 police officers that are armed. About just over 2,000 of those are in the Met in London. It is a very, very dangerous profession. Obviously, if you're going to incidents in which you've been called and you're going there with, armed, it's something where we want the police to know that they have our support. And this particular officer in question, he has had 2 years of not knowing whether he was going to be found guilty. His passport was taken away from him. He was suspended from the police force for 2 years because of this case. Now, I personally don't think this is something that should have been prosecuted. But then I don't know a great deal about the legal process, but it seems strange to me when you look at this case. It doesn't seem to me that there's much evidence to suggest that he murdered him in an unlawful way.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you if you wind the clock back a bit, there was quite a lot of, as you say, people lining up, effectively assuming that the police action had been the wrong action. It had been effectively a kind of almost a Black Lives Matter kind of incident. So lots of people like Diane Abbott and Storms, they were demonstrating, assuming automatically that the police were in the wrong. And as you say, that must make it very difficult for the police when people automatically jump to that conclusion, because given that they have our backs, it should be quite reasonable for them to assume that we have theirs. So how do we recreate and rebuild that trust in their police force?
I'll play you this. This was from a Labour MP, Belle Ribeiro Addy, and she was being interviewed on Sky News.
Give us your reaction when you heard the verdict today.
Well, obviously the first thing that we have to take into consideration is that a young man has lost his life, and the family will be grieving today. They, as they've rightly said, are devastated by what has happened, and we have to respect that.
And do you respect the decision of the jury, I guess?
We have to respect legal processes. However, we do also have to respect the fact that the CPS thought that there was enough evidence to bring a murder charge. It's absolutely right that when somebody dies after contact with the police, that there is an investigation. That is what happened here, and it went further. Obviously, there will be many, many people who are upset about the outcome. There was a lot of upset and anger following Chris Kaba's fatal shooting, and we'll see that expressed at the protest today.
So she goes on to say that she will be attending that protest, which just completely baffles me. And she says that there is a lot of anger and fear in the community. Well, I would suggest that she is to blame for that, because she is stoking these racial divisions. There is no evidence to say that the police are racist in my mind. I've not seen any. I'm willing to look at it if there is. Do you know how many times police intentionally fired a weapon at somebody in the last year?
Less than 10.
Two.
Twice
in the year from March 23 to March 24. And if you compare that to somewhere like America, for example, police in America killed 1,163 people in the last year that they have records for, which was 2023. So this is something that is not a problem in the UK in the same way that it is in America.
So you'd played that clip from the Labour MP. I think perhaps what I found most chilling about what she said there was that she said that because the officer had been prosecuted, even though he had been found innocent, there was still some level of guiltiness hanging over him. If we're going to change our legal system to say that anybody who is prosecuted is never exonerated, whatever the jury says, that to me is a complete undermining of our legal system. And for a Labour MP to say that seems to me just almost incredible.
Right, exactly. And that when I heard that, I was shocked, because I thought, maybe I'm naive, but when the reports came out that he was found not guilty, I assumed then that there would be an outpouring of sorrow for this man who had been put through this for the last 2 years, who had been suspended, even though he was found not guilty, which means he's not guilty. That's the way the legal system works. And yet, Labour MPs, I mean, I'll read you what Sadiq Khan said. He said something similar, where he said, "I will respect the verdict of the court." I thought, well, yeah, obviously. Isn't it bonkers that we have big name politicians? You know, he's the mayor of our biggest city, and he's saying things like, "I'll respect the verdict of the court." Well, obviously you respect the verdict of the court. That's the system we operate in. I mean, it's just crazy to me. And he went on to say, "I understand the impact of Chris Kaba's death has had on London's community and the anger, pain and fear it has caused." And again, it's because of people like Sadiq Khan that is intent on dividing us based on racial lines. Why are we not concerned after this about the police officer that's gone through 2 years of this? Of course, Chris Kaba's death is sad in the way that anybody's death is sad. But I've forgotten to say that it's come to light since the verdict on Monday that Chris Kaba was actually involved in a gang and had shot somebody just days before that in a nightclub, was driving this vehicle that was involved in a firearms incident the night before. This is a criminal, somebody that's part of a gang, and yet the Mayor of London is talking about the impact that his death would have caused on the black community in London. And I think, how dare you talk for the black people in London? Black people in London want to feel protected just as much as any of us want to feel protected.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what the police are there for. And the police aren't there to worry about racial injustice or the things that these Labour politicians are spouting. And I find it so... The worst thing about this is that the left used to care about things like economic inequality, poverty, and now they've given up talking about any of these things, and all they talk about is racial division. And I find that infuriating.
I'm equally infuriated by it. So a big show of support from us to our police force and our police officers.